Milani Peterson is still trying to understand what happened inside her ex-husband's home.
The last time I saw him, I took a picture of him.
West Haven, Utah is the kind of town that still believes in community, where neighbors look out for each other and kids play safely under the mountain sky. At his elementary school, 12-year-old Gavin Peterson was known for his bright, contagious smile, a boy who lit up every room. But that smile was a mask, the only thing he could control. Behind closed doors, Gavin faced quiet challenges in a home that should have been a safe haven. This is the story of how life at home became complicated and how the very place meant to protect him, home, was filled with obstacles he couldn't overcome. On a frosty January morning in 2012, a little boy named Gavin Hanson Peterson came into the world in Ogden, Utah. He was the youngest of 3 children born to Milani and Shane Peterson, a bright addition to a family already filled with love from his older brother Tyler and his sister Milani. Gavin's earliest years were touched by change. His parents parted ways while he was still a baby. In time, his father built a new chapter with Nicole Lee Scott, and Gavin soon gained another brother through that union, expanding the circle of family who cared for him. Gavin's childhood carried the sweetness of ordinary days. He found joy in small things, hours spent on his Nintendo Switch, fascination with Pokemon, and the quiet rhythms of home and school life. Teachers and staff quickly noticed how easily he connected with people. Jan Davis, a cafeteria worker, remembered him as a child who radiated joy, saying he had a way of lighting up even the most ordinary moment. At just 12 years old, he carried with him a brightness and warmth that made others feel seen and cared for. For the first years of their childhood, all 3 Peterson children lived primarily with their mother, Milani. But in 2014, a moment of crisis altered the family's course. A police officer came across 2-year-old Gavin wandering alone near their neighborhood. Concerned residents guided the officer back to his home. What began as a simple welfare check soon uncovered deeper concerns. But before we begin, I just want to say thank you to my amazing viewers and subscribers. Your support through likes, shares, and comments means the world to me. Your engagement helps make these stories even more meaningful. If you're new here, don't forget to hit that subscribe button and join our growing community of true crime enthusiasts. Inside, authorities found signs raising red flags about the children's safety, prompting a child welfare case and a call to their father, Shane. Milani was ordered to complete community service, pay fines, and enroll in counseling and treatment programs. It was a heavy burden, but she faced it head-on, telling herself she owed it to her children to make every effort to heal and rebuild. Milani did everything asked of her, attending classes and working to prove her commitment. Yet despite her progress, the court determined that the children would be better placed in their father's household, viewed as more stable and secure. For Milani, this decision was devastating. She later expressed how hard she had tried, sharing that she attended every session and worked on her mental health because she wanted to be the mother her children deserved. To her, it felt as though no matter how much she changed, the system had already made up its mind. Even so, Milani remained present in her children's lives. She arrived early on the mornings she was scheduled to see them, and Gavin in particular would run into her arms, eager to share his stories and soak up her attention. Their bond was obvious and unshakable. But with Tyler and Milani, things felt different. Tyler often kept his distance, while Milani grew easily frustrated by small things. Milani struggled to understand what had caused this change. They had once been so close. Now she wondered what had shifted and why her children seemed to be slipping away from her. When the Peterson children first settled into life with their father, Shane, and his new wife, Nicole, things seemed steady. Milani later recalled that while their dad enforced more rules than their mother had, the structure felt familiar. He had always been the stricter parent. Nicole often stepped in when Shane wasn't home, making sure the children kept up with their daily responsibilities. At first, Milani even came to view Nicole as a guiding figure, someone who helped keep the household in order. For a while, the arrangement appeared to work, though there was tension whenever Nicole spoke negatively about their mother. But over time, something changed. Milani couldn't point to a single moment. It was a gradual shift that left her feeling unwelcome. Sharp words and frequent criticism grew heavier, with Milani describing times when meals were limited or she faced strict rules for showing resistance. She also remembered how her father often turned away, as though protecting his peace mattered more than addressing what was happening. Perhaps most painful of all was the way her bond with Tyler faded. Once her closest companion, he began siding with Nicole, leaving Milani feeling more alone than ever. Nicole's role in the home seemed to harden. Rather than sharing in the nurturing responsibilities of a stepmother, she placed increasing demands on Milani. After school, Milani was expected to take on household chores alone while Shane was at work. Nicole's expectations didn't stop there. Once Milani finished at home, she was often sent down the street to their great-grandmother's house to continue through a second list of tasks. What should have been a place of rest and safety turned into an exhausting routine that left her feeling more like a helper than a child. Milani did her best to push back, but she quickly learned that challenging Nicole often brought stricter consequences. Over time, she began to believe that resisting wasn't worth it. The environment taught her to shrink herself, to accept unfair treatment as though it were normal, even though deep down she knew it was not. A childhood that should have been filled with play and discovery was instead shadowed by fear and exhaustion. By 2016, Milani reached a breaking point. She confided in a friend at school about what was happening behind closed doors. Friends had already noticed the visible signs, the kinds of aches and weariness that were becoming harder to hide. Shock spread through her circle. How could this be happening in a household that was supposed to protect her? Was Gavin experiencing the same? Where was Shane in all of this? Those same questions were later raised by a caseworker from the Department of Children and Family Services who came to Milani's school after a report was made. One brave disclosure had set an official investigation into motion, pulling back the curtain on what the children had been experiencing. When caseworkers finally sat down with Milani, they asked her hard questions. Whether she felt safe at home, whether her stepmother had been unkind, whether the stories her classmates shared about her long hours in the sun were true. Milani froze. She worried that if she spoke openly, the situation at home might only grow worse. So at first, she denied it. She told the worker that her friends had misunderstood and that everything was fine. But the quiet signs of distress on her body told a different story. Gently, the caseworker urged her to be honest, promising that her voice mattered. Summoning courage she hardly knew she had, Milani admitted what she had been enduring. With her statement and visible concerns to support it, the agency now had evidence of unfair treatment. Their solution was what they called a safety plan. Milani would not be left in Nicole's care without her father being present. Until then, her routine changed. After school, she would go directly to her great-grandmother's house, wait there until Shane came home, and then return to the family residence. On paper, this was meant to protect her. Within a month, the case was marked resolved and formally closed. But to Nicole, Milani's disclosure felt like betrayal. In her eyes, Milani had gone to outsiders and questioned her role in the home. For Milani, the years that followed became even harder. She later recalled being isolated, with meals often limited, and forced to work under exhausting conditions. Food was sometimes used in ways that felt more like control than care. What should have been a home filled with guidance and warmth had turned into a place of control and fear. Shane remained distant, often acting as though nothing was wrong. Tyler, once her closest ally, was encouraged to follow Nicole's lead. Over time, he joined in belittling her, no longer treating her as a sister, but as someone he had been persuaded to reject. For Milani, the loneliness cut as deep as the harsh treatment itself. As for Gavin, Milani said that while he was spared much of what she went through, it was clear that Nicole harbored resentment toward him as well. In Nicole's eyes, Milani was the one who challenged authority, and so she became the primary focus. Still, the thought lingered. If it could happen to her, how safe was Gavin really? By 2018, Milani felt she could no longer manage the difficulties of life at home. Though still only a young teenager, she believed her only way forward was to get away. One afternoon, she made her way to a nearby gas station, hoping someone might finally hear her and offer support. She asked the employees for help, yearning for a safe place and a listening ear. But instead of the protection she sought, they contacted Shane and Nicole, sending her back to the very home she had tried to leave. When her father and stepmother arrived, they appeared calm and convincing. Nicole spoke gently, assuring Milani that things would change, while Shane told her siblings were worried and wanted her back. The mention of her little brother, Gavin, weighed heavily on her heart. Hoping that this time would be different, Milani agreed to return. During the ride back, the atmosphere shifted. The promises of kindness gave way to tension, and the situation reminded Milani of why she had wanted to leave in the first place. The very next day, she was withdrawn from school under the promise of being taught at home. Instead of feeling safer, Milani soon realized that the pattern of strict rules and limited freedom was continuing. In 2019, while mowing the lawn, Milani accidentally damaged a sprinkler. To most, it was a minor mistake, but to Milani, even small missteps could bring consequences. With trembling hands, she approached her father, hoping for protection. Shane told her to get into the truck. She assumed they were heading to replace the sprinkler before Nicole noticed, but instead he drove her to her mother's home, dropped her off on the porch, and left. That was the final time Milani ever saw him. Looking back, Milani says she had been persuaded to distance herself from her mother. Under her father and stepmother's roof, she recalls days marked by emotional strain. She describes being closely watched, facing rules that left her feeling powerless, and moments that made her feel unseen. At times, her needs went unmet and meals were limited, leaving her appearing weaker over time. Milani also remembers being confined to her room, with her every move tracked. She speaks of moments when she was kept in place and warned she could not move without facing strict discipline. By March 2019, a friend grew concerned and reported what Milani was enduring at school. Child Protection Services became involved, but Milani recalls being told that little could be done. A safety plan was put in place, stating Nicole should not be left alone with her. Still, Milani says the poor treatment carried on until May 2019, when she was finally allowed to move in with her mother, Melanie. Melanie had long sensed that something was not right, but when she finally saw her daughter looking tired, covered in visible concerns and deeply withdrawn, she knew she had to act. She reached out to law enforcement, hoping this would open the door to regaining custody of her children, who remained in Shane and Nicole's home. Instead, she was referred once again to Child Protection Services. According to Melanie, the assigned worker minimized her daughter's situation, suggesting that the father's household might simply be more strict than hers. The worker even dismissed what happened, Milani's hair being shaved off, as little more than a parenting choice. "I don't understand how they didn't see that something was wrong," Melanie later said. Even so, Milani's words prompted an official home visit. Shane and Nicole knew it was coming, and by the time the worker arrived, they had rehearsed their answers. Nicole did much of the talking, appearing overly emotional, even to the point of tears. She described Milani as defiant, claiming the haircut was because the girl had smelled unclean and might be mocked at school. When asked about the periods Milani had been absent from class, the couple explained it away by pointing to the time she had run away, saying she needed constant oversight. Investigators also questioned Shane about why he had abruptly left his daughter at her mother's house. He denied Milani's story about the sprinkler incident, insisting instead that he had warned her that continued defiance would result in being sent back to Melanie's care. He framed her behavior as simple rebellion and argued she resented him for enforcing household rules. In the end, it became his and Nicole's account against Milani's. The agency accepted the explanation, suggesting it was more likely a teenager unhappy with discipline than a child experiencing real hardship. For Milani, it was another instance of the system turning away. Despite the disappointment, Milani finally found relief in being able to stay with her mother. Melanie, however, could not rest, her concerns still focused on her youngest son. Tyler was already an adult, and by then 𝐂𝐫 had successfully driven a wedge between him and the rest of the family. That left Gavin, and Melanie was determined to bring him home. According to later accounts, 𝐂𝐫 hadn't shown much warmth toward Gavin, but she also hadn't focused on him until Milani was gone. With his sister no longer there, the attention shifted. Gavin was given responsibilities that were heavy for someone his age, often helping with many household tasks. At times, his meals were simple and sometimes limited, depending on the household routine. Some nights, he had only a light snack before going to bed. Over time, Gavin's energy noticeably dropped. His once lively presence seemed diminished, and Melanie became alarmed when she noticed he was losing weight. She tried to capture her concerns in photographs, but when she did, Shane and 𝐂𝐫 accused her of violating custody agreements and attempting to sway Gavin against them. Instead of addressing Gavin's situation, the complaint shifted attention onto Melanie. Officials eventually told both parents that improvements were needed in their households, but no deeper inquiry was made into what Gavin was experiencing. Worries for Gavin were not limited to his mother. At school, staff members noticed his unusual behavior at lunchtime. He would often ask for nothing but water, quietly standing by until classmates returned to class. Then, when no one was looking, he would try to find extra food. His embarrassment was clear, and for a long time, he kept his struggles to himself. Eventually, he confided in Jan, a cafeteria worker who promised she would keep his trust. Gavin explained that he was hungry most days and had no money for meals at school. Jan and her colleagues saw the toll it was taking on him. He appeared tired and often lacked the energy expected of a boy his age. Wanting to help, they quietly added funds to his lunch account so he could at least have meals while at school. When 𝐂𝐫 discovered this, she came to the school, insisting that she alone should decide if Gavin had money for lunch. Staff felt powerless to challenge her authority, but they did not abandon him. Instead, they began quietly sharing parts of their own meals, and classmates often offered food from their trays. School became the one place Gavin could rely on for kindness and relief. Teachers and administrators also raised alarms. The district filed multiple reports with local agencies, worried about Gavin's well-being. By law, child protection workers were required to track these concerns, which dated back to 2018 when visible concerns had first been documented on Milani. That case, however, was closed within a month, with the determination that Gavin was not in immediate danger. On February 27, 2020, shortly after Milani went to live with her mother, another call was made, this time specifically about Gavin. 3 months later, in May, a juvenile court required both households to take part in in-home services, coordinated by child protection officials. Still, new reports followed. In August of that same year, another call was placed, again raising red flags for Gavin's safety. The agency marked it as inconclusive due to insufficient evidence. By May 21, 2021, officials declared that the Peterson family had successfully completed their in-home services. With that, the case was closed, and Gavin remained in the care of his father and stepmother. A little over a year after earlier concerns had been filed, another report about the Peterson household reached Child Services, 16 months later to be exact. Because of the family's history, the matter was reviewed by a supervisor, but it was ultimately decided that the details did not meet the legal threshold to move forward. Then, in late March of 2023, new information came in. On March 28th, a call was made raising concerns about Gavin's well-being, and an investigation was opened. Only 2 days later, a second call followed with similar notes, which were added to the ongoing review. After multiple alerts had come in, workers arranged to speak with Gavin directly. On March 31st, at school and away from his guardians, he was interviewed by an investigator. According to the report, Gavin told them that everything at home was fine and that no unfair treatment was taking place. The notes did not make clear whether the worker considered his physical condition a cause for concern, though his teachers and cafeteria staff had long voiced worries about his health. Soon after this visit, Gavin was withdrawn from public school and began homeschooling. Another step was taken on May 15, 2023, when a home visit was conducted while Shane and Nicole were away. Again, Gavin assured the caseworker that he was safe. With no evidence meeting the official standards, the investigation was closed that same day. Yet later, observations suggested that important details were overlooked. Those who looked through the family's home computer found photographs of nearly every child except Gavin. One co-worker of Shane's remembered framed pictures of his youngest son on his desk, but said they had never once heard Gavin's name. To many, it was as though he had been left out of the family story. Digital records revealed another heartbreaking glimpse into how Gavin was spoken about. In private messages, his name was rarely used. Instead, he was referred to in harsh and unkind terms. His bedroom, too, told its own story. While his siblings' spaces were furnished with more comfort, Gavin's room appeared stark and unfinished, with a floor of bare plywood instead of carpeting. Investigators described it as a space that did not reflect the care or dignity a child deserved. Concerns also extended to Gavin's day-to-day experiences. Reports later indicated that even his older brother sometimes enforced strict rules, which left Gavin feeling isolated and overwhelmed. At times, his meals were very simple, and water wasn't always freely offered, creating a challenging situation for any child. On the afternoon of July 9, 2024, emergency crews were called to the Peterson residence in Weber County. When first responders arrived, they discovered 12-year-old Gavin in a deeply concerning condition. Paramedics rushed him to 𝐀𝐫𝐜𝐜𝐡𝐢𝐯 Hospital, doing everything they could to stabilize him. But tragically, his young life ended only minutes after arrival. In the aftermath, it was noted that his health had been in serious decline for some time, with clear indications that his most basic needs had gone unmet. It was Nicole who placed the 911 call that day. She told dispatchers Gavin had been ill and that she had attempted CPR while waiting for help to arrive. What was not shared immediately, however, was that precious time had passed between when Gavin was first discovered and when the call for help was actually made. In that window, phone calls were exchanged with Shane, and effort was spent unlocking Gavin's bedroom door rather than urgently seeking medical assistance. Tyler, Gavin's older brother, also played a role in what unfolded. Texts later revealed that instead of expressing concern for Gavin's condition, he frantically asked his father what the family should do next. Surveillance footage from the property would later show him carrying equipment from the backyard shed, removing cameras that had been installed in Gavin's room. The attempt to conceal what had been happening inside the home quickly came to light, and before long, Nicole, Shane, and Tyler were each taken into custody. Investigators soon uncovered why surveillance devices had been placed in Gavin's room in the first place. Images and records later shown in court painted a heartbreaking picture. Gavin had been isolated in a room lacking the warmth and comfort that every child deserves, and his surroundings revealed clear signs that his needs were being overlooked. Communications within the household reflected a dismissive attitude toward him, often avoiding even the use of his name. When outside professionals raised concerns about his health and well-being, those warnings were downplayed rather than acted upon. The justice system ultimately held each of the adults accountable. Nicole, identified by the judge as the primary driver of Gavin's harsh treatment, pleaded guilty to multiple charges and received a sentence of 15 years to life, along with additional terms to be served consecutively. During sentencing, Judge 𝐀𝐫𝐜𝐻 addressed her directly, saying there was no hope she should cling to about release, and that the weight of her actions meant she should expect to remain in prison for life. Shane also admitted to charges connected to Gavin and to the impact on the other children in his household. The court noted how little visible emotion he showed, especially compared to the grief of those around him. The judge's words carried through the courtroom, firm, unwavering, yet full of compassion. For a woman who had presided over countless difficult cases, allowing her emotions to break through in this moment showed just how extraordinary Gavin's story truly was. Her voice did not tremble from inexperience, but from the undeniable weight of what Gavin had endured, something too profound to be contained by legal terms or courtroom formalities. What stood out most was not just the sentence or the condemnation of a father who had long abandoned his role. It was the sheer weight of betrayal. The acknowledgement that Gavin, a child full of potential, was deprived of the protections he deserved. The judge made it clear, no words, no letters of support, no excuses could erase what had been done. For everyone listening, it was impossible to ignore the contrast between a judge holding back tears for a child he never met and a father sitting stone-faced, as if untouched by the devastation around him. That contrast told its own story. It painted a picture of absence, not just of proper care, but of basic humanity. In the end, the judge's commentary wasn't just about a crime. It was about a life affected, trust destroyed, and responsibilities that were neglected. The court ordered Shane Peterson to serve a minimum of 5 years to life in prison for his role in Gavin's passing. He also received additional prison terms related to the lack of proper care in the home, with each sentence set to run consecutively. These penalties came through a plea agreement, which also ensured that prosecutors would not pursue a more severe charge. Gavin's older brother, Tyler, faced his own legal proceedings. On March 20th, he admitted to several charges connected to Gavin's situation while the court considered his mental health. Tyler has since been diagnosed with autism spectrum disorder, depression, anxiety, and other conditions. While he remains under supervision and continues treatment at home, a final decision about his sentencing has not yet been determined. At Gavin's memorial, the color blue was everywhere. Balloons, ribbons, stuffed animals, all chosen to honor the shade he loved most. Neighbors and friends gathered in West Haven to grieve, carrying with them a heavy sense of responsibility. Many admitted they had known pieces of Gavin's reality, his absence from school, concerns of unfair treatment and instability in his home, yet felt powerless to intervene. Their sorrow was not only for the tragic loss, but also for the missed chances to change his path. This case is one that lingers long after you hear it. Gavin's story reminds us how deeply every young person needs safety, care, and love, and how devastating it is when those needs go unmet. His life should have been full of warmth, laughter, and belonging, and that is what we will always remember about him. If you believe Gavin's story deserves to be told, please support this channel by liking the video, subscribing, and sharing so more people can hear his name.